crisis center. Now we speak about reforms in the country. The reforms are required in the media, and that should be done by professionals. And now about we'll discuss with experts and Natalya Sokolenko, journalist from Hromadske radio and activist, and Svitlana Ostapa, journalist of Telekritika, and Ihor Rozkladay, lawyer of the Institute of Media Law and manager of RPR on media reform. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Would like to tell you about that problem that we see in Ukraine on committees in the parliament and who will work in different committees, especially the Committee on Freedom of Speech and Information. Andriy Shevchenko was the chairman, Yuri Olenda Mudarenko, and Mykola Timenko. They were leaders, chairs of this committee. All of them were in media, more or less, but they consider themselves to be politicians, but not of defenders of journalists and media. In the Committee on Freedom of Speech and Information, it's not all. It's the committee. It's a small committee of 10 members, and it is not to be. It's not very popular. And if there are representatives of different political forces, that's mostly those who lobby interests of media sector. But we want it to be run by such a person who would lobby interests of journalists, interests of the society, because the society must have the right for objective information, for true information. And we must see that we wanted to see someone who is who will lobby our interests. For many years, they were drawing very good plans in that committee, plans based on problems and interests and requests of journalists and media people, but they were never able to implement those plans. Now, we would like and demand that committee to be run by a person who knows all problems of media and journalists. During the last year of the work of that committee, during the last months, the meetings of the committee were conducted in a very surprising way. It was very difficult to be there, and the journalists were not allowed, though I tried to visit all the meetings of that committee. So those issues they discussed at the beginning of the year, we were not able to keep a track how they lobbied. They were lobbied in the committee, how they were considered one of the most important issues. Punishment was punishment of those who didn't allow journalists to work well on Maidan. Punishment of those who were beating journalists on Bankova Street on the 1st of December. And if later on those issues were not considered in the committee. Among achievements in the committee, there are some media laws, but again, because they were approved from the position, from the point of view political sense, they amended it the way they wanted. And now we have a wonderful law, framework law, and it took us a lot to have it. That is the law of on public broadcasting, but because of amendments between the first and the second reading, it was changed a little bit. Now we cannot, for example, to create for half a year, we cannot create public broadcasting, though the law provides that opportunity. Provides that. If to take all heads of the committee who were on this committee during the last years, they were trying to be efficient. But some advertised themselves, some did it more, some less, and it happened that the committee didn't work for 5 months, only because one political force knew that they wanted to support one issue. They didn't come to the meeting, and there was no quorum, and so that's why there were no meetings. It happened several times during the last years. In the parliament now we have Mykola Tomenko and Yuri States. Maybe there will be Andriy Shevchenko will be elected. Maybe they deserve to head that committee if they want to have some other positions. But we have our own candidates, and my colleagues will mention that. Let's not have this intrigue for long. We suggest that the committee on this committee, we want it to be headed by journalists who followed the journal standards and who announced on their civic position not only before elections but also when those elections were not even visitable, not even about in our dreams, when there was a dictatorship in Ukraine, and with all the threats and consequences for journalists who declared that position and who followed standards. Among the best candidates, we believe that that committee can be run by Svitlana Ostapa and also Mustafa Nayem, Sergei Leshchenko, Victoria Sumar. These candidates were supported by a censorship group and by other organizations of journalists and movements, and that's why we ask to support that point. Second position, stop censorship. In any case, that committee should not include as members of opposition, especially if they have something which is left from conscience. They have no right even to be in that committee. Look at this picture of Dmitro Hnap. He was attacked on the 29th of November. It's not an army, not in troop interiors. These are thugs in Mariinsky Park, and they were provided by MPs from opposition bloc and leaders, speakers, etc. That's why we as journalists were categorically against those people who would set pressure on freedom of speech and journalists, and who organized and who were involved in organizing attacks against and even one Veremi from Vesti, he died because of those thugs. And that's why we underline that it's those people who voted, not only members of the opposition bloc, but those who voted for dictatorship laws on January 16, go to other committees. If you are a very good businessman, experts on energy issues, etc., maybe you were not able to understand what were you voting for on January 16. Sit in other committees. Don't touch our committee, because you showed that you're not competent on issues of freedom of speech, rights and freedoms of citizens in our country.
When speaking about laws, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Ihor Rozkladay, Loyal Institute of Media Law, expert of PRP. We managed to reflect in the coalition agreement several changes which should be made to the legislation. The media sphere always has been one of the top political interests. On the other hand, it had been always under lobbyist pressure, and many useful pieces of legislation were simply blocked in the parliament. That's why many journalists, participants of the Stop Censorship movement, would like to draw attention that to the fact that today Ukraine drastically needs changes in media sphere. In particular, we should pass the law on public broadcasting, which has been very much wished by society in since 1995. The next issue, existence of the governmental mass media state mass media is a prerequisite for lobbying of the interests of governmental officials. That is, we need a new version of the the law on public broadcasting and the law on the regulator in the mass media, which will regulate the market of mass media. And everybody should be sure that this regulator will act in the interests of all actors in the market. Also, we need to amend Article 271 of the Criminal Code of Ukraine, which should refer to the media worker, a journalist, cameraman, etc., to not just an ordinary person, but as a professional which has special responsibility to the society, because we have witnessed a huge number of criminal cases against journalists and huge interferences. Also, one more important sphere, we should change the law on public moral. We should cancel and dismiss the State Committee on the Public Moral, because it has it does not work properly. You have just heard how many laws should be passed for the efficient work of media. This media revolution has to start eventually, and in the parliamentary committee to which we referred today, we would like to see those people who will be able to launch and follow up this reform. One of the most topical issues for the Parliamentary Committee on Mass Media was the law on advertising. We do not believe that this is the most topical law for them. We believe that the law on public broadcasting is of primarily importance. Also, we need to think carefully about efficient work of the regulator in the sector. Some time ago, when Stop Censorship movement and other journalist associations called up the government, called up the parliament to involve our journalist experts to their work, and unfortunately, we were not heard. Again, we see that people who are lobbying media sector, media giants, they again entering the parliamentary committee. We again call up to the president and to the parliament to appoint Taras Shevchenko or Taras Kotyzhinsky or Tatiana Kotyzhinska as the members to this committee. Now questions from journalists. Thank you very much for your vision. I'm representing a civil association platform of adding health to the society. My first question, besides privatization of the mass media you see? What specific steps in the media reform do you see? Whether you have experience in undertaking media reform, and again, who will finance reform in mass media? And my second question, whether you had any experience in implementing reforms. One of the laws which was lobbied by media community, this was about the access to public information, which was passed in 2011, and the new version of this law. And it was negotiated by Svitlana Zaleshuk, Mustafa Nayem, Victoria Sumar, Sergei Lещенко. These were people who participated in the passage of this law. Before their participation in the process, back in 2010, we had a much worse law. Currently, we work not only on the passage of the laws, we also continue our work on implementation of the laws passed, which involves cooperation between different communities, community of journalists, government officials, and a broad public. Also, we participate in working groups on implementation of public broadcasting, and the problems continue to appear everywhere, because it's not simply dependent on the passage of the law. That is, I want to say that we have an experience about privatizing of state media. We believe that this will contribute to decrease of the tax burden on taxpayers, because now they won't pay for inefficient media. As for public broadcasting, actually, when you commit to pay for public broadcasting, you also, on the other hand, you will be able to control the content of this public broadcasting. And anyway, you pay for the broadcasting. So the society has to understand that if you wish to have quality broadcasting, you should pay for it. Look at this picture. This is a building which belongs to the one newspaper, which is called Голос України. Just imagine, this is the state newspaper, and just imagine that this building will go privatized and taxpayers won't pay for it anymore. We have even suggestions for Голос України newspaper. And once Sergei Lещенко has shown me a book, a white paper from the UK, where there was a characteristic of the conflict of interests between British politicians and some other interests. That is, all the shares, companies, properties, remuneration were mentioned. I believe that Голос України journalists will be able to collect this information, and Rada channel should broadcast sittings of the parliament, cover committee sittings, and also they should provide information in the social media and point out to the most important problems, and this will require much less money than they spend today. As for the public broadcasting, we can use existing resources of the state channels, which are currently financed from the national budget. As soon as the legal entity of the public broadcasting will be established, it will get approximately the same amount of funding which is now allocated for all those channels altogether. As for mass media in general, everywhere in the world, journalists take activities of the authorities with criticism. Why we should establish fair rules of the game in journalist profession. There should not be state mass media where journalists simply drink coffee and publish news which are given by the government. In neighboring countries like Poland, Baltic countries, they got rid of the state mass media, and they live happily without them, and they do not feel any problems. Why do we always think that everybody, it is easy for everybody, but not us?
One comment and then a question. First of all, probably you saw what was happening and the discussion about candidates in the networks, social networks, and there are different views. And to say that to speak for all media community is not correct. We are not trying to say. And secondly, I would like to understand, there is a warning. It seems like under Yanukovych, they were closing all fronts, and now with the new authorities, the new government, they will have the same. Whereas the petition about those who are not loyal, they will be treated like under Yanukovych, but it will be different. What's the guarantee? All of that depends on us. Honestly, I'm not happy to ask a candidate from pro-governmental faction, because we always asked to have a candidate from the opposition. Though there is a no in the rules of the parliament, it doesn't say that the chairman of the committee should be from the opposition. No. But we are under the circumstances that we have in the country, which is a force which is called itself oppositional, and like a non-sexual maniac. So we have the opposition, which is not opposition, real opposition. It seems to me that there will be, in some time, that opposition will be created. But now we have some fears. If a candidate, there will be a candidate from the oppositional, so-called oppositional bloc, it will be used for his own advertisement, that position to defend not media interests, not journalist interests, and that's why, because that committee is the first step to approve laws and media reform. That's why we decided to make such a statement. I will articulate it again as Stop Censorship Movement and some other organizations like Telekritika, Institute of Media, Mass Information, etc. support. I didn't say all media community. I cannot compare ourselves with a newspaper Vesti. What I talk about day newspaper. When did you have such a discussion were candidates, some other candidates in addition to those that you named. And on the page of Svitlana Ostapa, you could say that there will be the reform of to prohibit companies that in offshore for them to be owners of Ukrainian media. That is quite a long story, old story. We have a problem with the transparency of media ownership, of media property. It's my vision, but it's about transparency of media property. One of the way is like in Georgia, complete prohibition of offshore. That's a difficult question. We can discuss it. We need to find that tool, that instrument, which would show complete ownership on all media. Because this legislation on transparency of property, it doesn't cover all press. Because of archaic or wrong, because it's like in Soviet, copy of the Soviet law. On media in Ukraine, a name, and then they put editors, editorial houses, etc. So if we want to achieve transparency, we should remember that we will need to solve that issue. Maybe there will be the loan press. It's still under discussion, but we should provide transparency of media assets, and this is a normal practice when consumers, if not directly, at least they should have a simple mechanism. For example, who can control one or the other media? It's quite normal. Even in internet media, they write who is an order, who has interest. Look, we find them in Cyprus and some other islands. So we collecting information on schemes and media schemes, and we know this issue quite good. Well, one of the ideas is could be like full prohibition, but I believe that probably before that we need to develop tax legislation. As to other candidates, what we discussed. In our community, I named people who belong to that media community. Only we thought only about those candidates. What's from the opposition? Rabinovich and Mr. Morocco. I will Forbes interview from with that Morocco. Were you chair of company MDS? Yes, in the last life. Zen boot site and the company MMDS are on the same service. How can you comment that? You ask Zenboot, and I am not responsible for operations, and I have no. So someone oppositional bloc, they should have conscience. They could offer Miroshnichenko. They said someone who is related to media is Zenboot. That's. An affair on our media market, which is notorious. There was some other candidates. We had a communication in Facebook, and Yuri Levchenko, for example, but because we voted the candidates we named, they got the majority of votes. You can suggest your candidates. Any question? Last question, please. Association of Ukrainian Lawyers and Republic Oksana. In mass media, there is a lot of wrong information, fake information about an expert commission on protection of social morale. There were 12 public events of the commission. One of them is round tables and Ukrainian warfare, information warfare, on the level of security service, National Defense and Security Council in the Ministry of Interior. And some of those candidates were invited, and not only they, but none of you, representative were not present at those round tables. You could see the community NGOs who participated in, plus you wanted to get rid of it. I hope that everybody understands this discussion. I am not invited because National Commission believes that I am immoral, and I can tell you why. Because Mr. Kostitsky, when I was working on a STB channel, and Andrei Andrushko, one of the best, and Ola Simonovich, because we briefly gave the thought of Vasily Kostitsky. So we described, as usual, journalists write. It lasted for 10-15 minutes, but TV news, they all from 2 to 3 minutes, and simultaneously 15, 10, 20 seconds, even if it's the president of Ukraine or the US. Kostitsky told it's wrong, and he called us immoral, and I believe it's not professional. I saw your press conference several days ago. You see, I would like to remind that the Commission on Morale exists only in democratic countries as Russia, Belarus, Asian countries, where they have state religion. That's the first. You're not an expert. The Commission on Morality does not belong. Doesn't include they cannot give expert assessment for courts. That using the tool we have now, like somebody makes conclusions and they find pornography, some text, and it's not honest. It's not an honest game because there is a body which can have quite serious influence to take decisions, but is not responsible for anything. Plus, there are a lot of questions to principles of such a commission. Why those people were appointed by the cabinet of ministers? Why they are not elected by the society? Why the commission is half of the members are not legitimate according to the law? Because that commission must expire in 5 years, and many the duties expired. That's why there are a lot of questions. That's why I told if you get together, if you call yourself like a civic organization, if you give recommendations and you draw attention to the problem in the society with problem with morality, for example, even priests speak about prostitution. So, but we didn't hear any answer from you. So there is church leadership and such things which create something negative in the society, and create some support fight between religions. You are not working on that, and we find. You fight against advertisements. So the issue of morality is the issue of self-regulation. There are commissions on journalist ethics, and they consider these issues. And that could be co-regulated, but it's one of the most efficient methods when there's a state-private public partnership in the field of information, when the industry is regulated through the body, which is a hybrid body, and they say they stop erotica on during hours for children. So they cannot use social morality, because social morality of mine and DNR, social morality of me and severalists. What is social morality? We don't have an answer for that question. What the law says, it's a nonsense. Sorry. Stop immorality. Do like us. Stop working. We in 2010 we bought these T-shirts, and then we had a march, and we have claims to the previous government, to this one, and we achieved success. I can tell you that there is under this government on the national channels we don't have censorship. There is ordered materials. We achieved that. What have you achieved for 4 million of budget money? When we speak about information and support of morality or morale of our citizens, there is no newsletter for them or for our citizens who are on occupied territories. So those 4 million for that structure should be used now to support the morality and morale of our soldiers. Thank you very much. Just last sentence. You named the roundtables you had this year together with the Institute of Media Law. We had the same number of roundtables, and we had more guests. And why journalists don't come to your roundtables? Probably it's not our question to us. You will be able to talk to journalists outside of the brief.